But one of the things people are pissed about right now is that you've seen Bitcoin go from 99.85 thousand down to, I don't know where it is now, 94, somewhere in that ballpark.
Mhm.
And at the same time, you had a 30% retracement in MicroStrategy in a day. And so MicroStrategy was knocking on the door of 550, and now it's beneath 400. And you're like, all right, well, hold on. This thing is supposed to be a play on Bitcoin. And essentially that's the only value that this brings to the table. But yet Bitcoin pulled back 4%, 8%, whatever the number is, and MicroStrategy pulled back 30%. Well, that's what leverage does.
Taylor, I've got to ask you a question. Something that I studied in finance school was the Hunt brothers. Obviously, they tried to corner the silver market. We'll get into some of those numbers in a minute. But I am thinking, has Michael Saylor, is he trying to corner the Bitcoin market? It seems like every other day he's borrowing billions and buying Bitcoin, which is taking number. I mean, is this just a big old scheme he's running here like the Hunt brothers? What's going on?
I heard described by someone as the Ponzi scheme on top of a pyramid scheme.
That's a good one. A Ponzi scheme on top of a pyramid scheme. There we go.
No, listen, this is the creation of an ultra bull market. That's what happens is people start doing things that seem great, and they might continue to be great. We'll see. But this is something that is outside the norm.
Yeah. So, folks, I pulled up Wikipedia. You can go look at this yourself. The Hunt brothers, if you don't know what we're talking about, in 1979, the price of silver was $6.08 an ounce on January 1st. By January 18th, 1980, it had increased 713% to $49.45. Again, that's 1980s dollars. That's not 2024 dollars. So think about that for a minute. It was estimated that at one point, the Hunt brothers, via futures contract, controlled 1/3 of the silver market, which is wild to think about. I'm not trying to say that Michael Saylor controls 1/3 of Bitcoin. I'm just saying, hey, is it a great idea to have one person own that much of something, keep issuing debt to keep buying? It just seems
he would love to own 1/3 of the Bitcoin market.
I bet he would. I bet he would.
He's trying to get there, doing the best he can. It is kind of crazy. So he is issuing 0 interest convertible notes to go out, bring more money in to buy more Bitcoin. And it is just the movement in MicroStrategy, which is let me set the stage on this too. MicroStrategy is a software company.
Yeah. Well, they were. Now they're just a freaking gold vault for Bitcoin.
Correct. They are a unsuccessful software company. Their software loses money, legitimately loses money. But yet the price has gone to the absolute moon because he has taken all of this fresh powder that he has generated legitimately out of thin air, right? He's issuing 0 interest rate convertible notes, which cost the company nothing, to bring in more capital to go out and buy Bitcoin. The interesting thing to me is the fact that MicroStrategy's price moves about 3x that of Bitcoin. So it's a leveraged play on Bitcoin. That's absolutely what it is. It's hard to make sense of going out and buying MicroStrategy with $1 when you could buy $3 worth of the same underlying Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I read several articles about this because I knew I was talking to you today and I wanted to talk about the Hunt brothers. That just doesn't logically make sense to me. If you want to own Bitcoin, why go through a proxy that is 3x the cost? It just doesn't logically make sense to me.
And a lot of people have been playing the long Bitcoin
short
MicroStrategy trade to try to squeeze it.
They're trying to pair trade.
Yeah, but by the way, they've been getting their face ripped off because MicroStrategy, minus a day where it was down 30% or something like that, minus that day, you have been much better off owning MicroStrategy this year than you have Bitcoin.
Go the other way.
Yeah. So you've been getting absolutely torched on that trade if you're placing it. But for the record, Bitcoin is up, I believe the number's 40% in the last month.
Yeah.
It's mind-numbing.
Yeah, it's been knocking on the door of 100,000. Again, you got to give Michael Saylor credit. He's been
it's worked.
It's dude, I don't know. Is there a word better than it worked? It's like, I mean, it's been the greatest.
He's in Nirvana right now. Yeah. So the interesting thing, and I did a video on social media about this, is I have heard a absurd amount of people, and this was at about 90,000 that I put out this video, saying that, hey, when it hits 100,000, I'm selling. And so I started to do a little bit more research. Yeah, a little bit more research into this. And there's also already massive synthetic selling via options markets at 100,000 that will automatically get triggered. And so you saw it. I put this out, and then 2 weeks later, it touched 99.8. And I was like, well, I'm going to be wrong. It's going to go through. Nope. Boom. Pulled back. And so there's apparently selling pressure on both sides via options right now. On the 100,000 side, that is going to keep it suppressed beneath that. But there's also a ton of options buying at 90,000. So the smart money is thinking that there is going to continue to be this trading window between 90 and 100 where it chops sideways, right? And at some point, one of those two barriers will be broken undoubtedly.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Just like all times. It is really interesting. And again, I would ask people to go back and study the Hunt brothers. They went from controlling roughly 1/3 of the silver market to being bankrupt, right? So it was a pretty, catastrophic collapse. Not saying that's happening to Michael Saylor. It's just interesting to me. The reason it makes sense to look at the Hunt brothers, when one person kind of dominates a market, it warrants at least thinking about it, I think.
I would be absolutely shocked if MicroStrategies doesn't get absolutely scorched. Like totally scorched.
The stock.
Yeah. And I say that just because, like, listen, I'm not saying it can't double from here. I would be an idiot to say that because literally it's been doubling every 2 months or 1 month or half a month for that matter. But what happens is these things go up and people are like, oh my God, I'm missing out on this. The FOMO takes over, the YOLO trade takes over, and all of a sudden it perpetuates up. But one of the things people are pissed about right now is that you've seen Bitcoin go from 99.85 thousand down to, I don't know where it is now, 94, somewhere in that ballpark. And at the same time, you had a 30% retracement in MicroStrategy in a day. And so MicroStrategy was knocking on the door of 550, and now it's beneath 400. And you're like, all right, well, hold on. This thing is supposed to be a play on Bitcoin. And essentially that's the only value that this brings to the table. But yet Bitcoin pulled back 4%, 8%, whatever the number is, and MicroStrategy pulled back 30%. Well, that's what leverage does.
Yeah, exactly. I just pulled up Bitcoin so we can have it on the record. As of this minute, it's 96,400. 96.
Okay. Yeah, so it's down 2%, 3%, 4%, whatever it is from its all-time high of 99.8. And again, to the point of that I was trying to make there, MicroStrategy is at beneath 400 right now versus almost 550.
The question that, the bull camp for Bitcoin, and I think there is a bull camp for Bitcoin, is we're starting to hear more and more companies adding Bitcoin to their treasury, right? We've heard, like, this is going back to when Tesla did it, right? Tesla, I don't know when that was, 2019, 20, whenever that was.
Yep.
They bought some, they wanted to diversify out of fiat currency.
Yep.
We're hearing more and more companies do that. They're small still, but again, anybody who's, putting millions of dollars into this, it's going to take capital or take Bitcoin off the market. My question is, what happens if sovereign wealth funds really take an interest, or countries? Like, what happens if the US government really does create a Bitcoin treasury reserve, right? Like they have for Fort Knox. Because if one big country like the US does it, it will be an arms race with other countries. I mean, this could get wild really, really fast.
I mean, I think that's why people are throwing numbers out there that seem absolutely ludicrous of $1 million of Bitcoin. Like, imagine me coming to the table and telling you, Michael, I think that Apple is legitimately going to be 10x the price in 4 years. You'd be like, dude, you're a moron.
Yeah.
Yeah, but people say it with Bitcoin, they're like, oh yeah, no, I totally agree. But that's the scarcity of the asset, right? There's never going to be more than 21 million of them created, and we're damn near it right now, for the record. And so with that, if a big government that has trillions, and it doesn't mean they invest trillions, but has trillions of dollars, that it can wash around, and all of a sudden they take a half of a percent exposure in this. Yeah, that's a big intrinsic buyer that didn't sit there before, right? And the other side of that is the U.S. government or European central government or whatever it is, are they willing to continue to bite this thing off and move the price and buy at 100, push it to 150, and buy 150, buy it to 200? Do they see that as a logical approach in this market? I don't know.
No, it's just really interesting to look at. Obviously the other thing that's been said post-election is this election cycle has produced the most pro-crypto Congress,
right?
Which will be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. Only counterpoint I'll really throw out there is, well, I'll throw a couple of them out there. There is still the argument out there. And I don't really think that there's anyone left saying this thing could go to zero, right?
Yeah,
I think those have been put by the wayside, but there's still the argument that, like, listen, this thing, there's no tangible value to it. And I think that argument is largely kind of be put away as well. But you have to understand that the history of Bitcoin, one, when it feels best to be involved, is not the time to be involved. There isn't a naysayer out there right now. There is not a naysayer out there right now. And so I don't know that, if you haven't been involved in Bitcoin, that 100,000, you're like, yep, now I'm in. That just seems like
it is so odd. There's that meme, right, where there's a huge line behind Bitcoin at 100,000 and there's like one person at 60,000.
And for the record, Michael Saylor is in that line as well. At 100,000 and not at 60,000.
He just keeps getting back in line.
No, that's the point though. And some of this might be a function of him not him being incapable of bringing in new assets at lower prices, but his purchase prices have been god awful.
They've been his average price point is way high at this point.
And so on the way up, he bought. On the way back down, I think it probably is a function of him not being able to attract more capital in these convertible notes. And so therefore he can't purchase down there, but he has not purchased. He was not a buyer at 15.
Nope. Yeah.
So
I guess the last thing on this topic is, obviously you have been working with the top 1% of 1% for, let's call it 15 years. I'm going to guess for most of that time, Bitcoin was looked at as somewhere between a scam and a fraud.
Yep.
I'm going to guess over the last 2 or 3 years, you've seen a noticeable change. I'm curious what's happening in 2024. Are the Richie Rich talking about insurance policies? Are they even asking questions about exposure?
They're asking questions, right? I don't think that most of them have made the leap to own it themselves, but they are now intrigued. And so two things to look at there. When it seems like sunshine and rainbows, it's a time to be fearful. Right. Or it's this crew that has not been comfortable with this asset is going to start to spill 0.5%, 1% of their wealth.
That has always been my thought. And that's what got me involved in 2018. I was like, hey, I've achieved a certain amount of wealth. I'm going to put 1% into this, and it's not going to be a trade. I don't even consider it an investment. I consider it an insurance policy on stupidity.
A huge hedge.
It's a hedge, right? Because again, if I lose 1% of my net worth, no big deal. But if shit got wild, it could pay off in spades.
Yep. And I will give full disclosure on this call too, because you're an owner. I am not an owner. I have been an owner in the past. I am not an owner now. So I'm not a hater of it, right? I see the value in it. I just think that the price right now is inflated. And I say that, and then people go, you're an idiot, it's going to $1 million. And they very well could be right. And that's all.
I can tell you this. I'm not sure I'll be an owner if it ticks over $1 million. I might have to consider my logic at that point, because that would be something like a 200x.
But I do think, kind of back to my initial comment, I do think that at $100,000, there is this mental threshold, like there is with anything. If the 10-year goes above 4% or whatever it is, at $100,000, I do think that there's a bit of a line in the sand where people go, I have now a crazy amount of wealth here, and that is a round number that's going to cause me to take down some of my exposure.
No, there's some maximalists that absolutely will take chips off the table. But again, back to your point, I think 100,000 is a psychological number for these wealthy folks. Those are the people I'm watching, because again, they're going to be like, hey, this, I thought this was a fraud. My kid told me about it, yada, yada, yada. It's now 6 figures.
They won't admit to the price going higher being the psychological entry point, but it is. It will. Totally fair.
I mean, I could see, people worth $100 million. These, rich families getting around the Thanksgiving table, and damn it, Bitcoin's a topic again.
I think most of them are still not there.
Okay.
But that said, that's from my personal experience. We're not having clients ask us, hey, can you buy us Bitcoin? Don't get me wrong, it has happened. But it is not a broad stroking.
It'll be interesting to see if that, because again, what I'm hearing you tell me is it's gone from, total ignorance and fraud and Ponzi scheme to interested to tell me more. And then at some point it goes to, all right, go get me 1%.
Purchase. Yeah. We're not at the purchase yet. At least again, that's one person.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. I think that's where we are.
Yeah. I just love this conversation. So again, folks, do yourself a favor. If you want to go study a little bit of history in the financial markets, go look up the Hunt brothers and silver. Taylor, where can people find you?
Yeah, find us every day on Instagram and TikTok. We do 60-second clips on what's going on in the markets. We're at Life Goal Investments, and our website's right there. So love to have you guys. Thank you.
There you go. Take care, brother.
Thanks, Michael.
Mm-hmm.